The cabin lights were warm, but the air was ice cold when she pointed her finger at me. "You don't belong here." Every head in business class turned. Cameras rose. My jaw tightened. Heat climbing my face, but I stayed seated. The lead flight attendant's voice cut through the hush, sharp, accusing, like she'd just caught a thief. I knew what she thought she saw. She had no idea who I was, or what I could do with one phone call. In minutes, her world and this airline's would crack wide open. But first, I wanted to see just how far they'd go. The cabin lights poured a warm glaze over leather headrests and neat rows of glassware. But the room temperature dropped when the finger appeared in front of my face. "You don't belong here." The nail hovered inches from my cheek, steady as a sightline. Conversations shut like overhead bins. Cameras lifted, tiny red dots winking awake along the aisle. I kept my back pinned to seat 2A and my hands folded on the armrest. Heat climbed my neck, but I let it burn clean, not wild. The nameplate on the woman's chest read Becky in cheerful block letters that didn't reach her eyes. Her mouth was a flat white line. Her finger didn't waver. "Boarding pass," she said, loud enough for row 3. She didn't ask. I slid the pass from the side pocket and set it in her palm. She held it to the cabin light like a cashier checking for counterfeit, then lowered it to a tablet in her other hand. A younger agent hovered in her shadow, the creases of his uniform still crisp. He carried a handheld scanner like a skittish bird. When the code on my pass faced him, his thumb twitched. The screen flashed something green and quick. His eyes widened. Becky shifted her hip a degree, blocking his view without looking back. "Not now," her shoulder said, though her mouth stayed still. Phones came up like a tide. A woman in 2B angled her camera toward us, hands unsteady. A man in 1C rustled his newspaper with deliberate irritation. The lights were warm, but bright enough to trap expressions. Doubt, interest, the small thrill of watching someone else's day derail. "This seat is reserved for premium revenue passengers," Becky said. "People try things." "I purchased 2A, I said, keeping my voice even. Evenness isn't surrender, it's a leash on a storm. "From where?" she asked, tightening her grip on the tablet. "Your airline's website," I answered. 3 weeks ago. She made a sound that was only punctuation for the audience. "These third-party sites print very convincing counterfeits," she announced to the cabin. "It happens." The younger agent, Marlin, set his badge, stepped forward. Another quick green reflected in the chrome edge of the galley. He swallowed and glanced at me, then at Becky. Becky didn't turn. She lifted my pass, examined its edges like a jeweler, and let silence work. A whisper traveled down the aisle. "They think she's in the wrong seat." Judgment gathers speed like a rolling cart. Once it's moving, people jump on because it's easier than walking. "Ma'am," Becky said, shaping the word until it sounded like a correction. "I'll need you to step out of the seat while we verify your documentation." Her finger returned, the half moon of her thumbnail inches from my lips. "I'm not in the aisle," I said. "I'm seated in the seat that matches my pass. You can scan it again." A muscle in her cheek jumped. "We'll handle it," she said to the cabin. She keyed her radio. "Supervisor to business class. Possible fraudulent ticket in 2A." The phrasing was smooth, institutional. The supervisor arrived with the pace of someone used to calming small fires. He wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He met the other passengers first. "We appreciate your patience," he told the room. And then to me, "Can I see your identification?" "You may," I said, and handed over my ID and credit card. He took them with the careful reluctance of someone picking up evidence. He examined the name, Maya Ellis. Like letters could be suspicious. "What brings you to Atlanta, Ms. Ellis?" "Work," I said. Becky exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh. She angled the tablet toward him. "Ticket looks off." Marlin found his voice. "The manifest shows VIP flag on the PNR." The supervisor glanced at him, then at Becky. "Systems glitch," Becky said smoothly, already pocketing the explanation. The audience nodded, soothed by something that sounded technical. Heat pulsed against my ribs. I adjusted the air vent and let the cool stream strike my temple. Let the cameras see the truth of my face. I was angry, and I was allowed to be. "Has anyone scanned the pass?" I asked. Becky didn't blink. "Ma'am, please step out of the seat." The finger hovered again, now directive. I studied it. Tiny chip in the polish. A faint nick near the knuckle. A tremor hiding under certainty. Human details, ordinary, in a moment choosing to be anything but. A man 2 rows back called, "Some of us have connections." Translation: "Hurry up, not be fair." The supervisor nodded at him like to an ally. "We'll be underway shortly." I kept my gaze on Becky. "Scan it." Marlon lifted the scanner. The beam swept the code. A cheerful chirp answered. For a split second, the screen flashed green. Admission, acceptance, the algorithmic yes. Becky leaned across him, shielding the display with her body. "Security will confirm," she said, already speaking over the result. Phones tilted higher. The woman in 2B whispered, "This feels wrong," to her audience and to herself. I traced the edge of my phone with my thumb. Not yet. Becky keyed her radio again. "We have a non-compliant passenger in 2A, she said, requesting security at the door. She turned back to me with the calm of someone who thinks a machine will do the rest of her work. Anger sharpened in me until it became clarity. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to plead. I wanted everyone to see what they were choosing and how easily they chose it. The aisle brightened as the forward door opened. A cooler draft rolled in, lifting the fine hairs along my forearms. 2 silhouettes paused at the threshold, then stepped into the glow. Airport security in navy jackets, radios breathing static on their shoulders. The cabin's attention gathered like a lens. Marlon looked at me once, quick, an apology that couldn't help. Becky straightened her shoulders. The supervisor adjusted his smile. The woman in 2B steadied her phone. The man in 1C folded his paper with a pop. I set my hands flat on the armrests, not in surrender, but to feel the boundaries of the space I had paid for. Around us, the warm cabin light felt colder, every screen recording, every eye choosing a side, and my anger settled into steel, waiting to see how far this performance would go. The finger hovered one last time, a punctuation mark waiting to be written. Becky's voice matched it, precise, performative, practiced. "Security is on the way, ma'am." The hum of the cabin settled into my ears, a low vibration beneath the polite chaos around me. I leaned back into the seat, not in comfort, but in deliberate stillness. My name is Maya Ellis. That's all anyone here knows. That's all I intend them to know for now. I've been in rooms where revealing too much too soon ruins the lesson you want someone to learn. Today was going to be a masterclass in that. A flicker from the corner of my mind took me back 20 years. I was 19, a summer intern at a logistics firm, traveling on a company voucher to shadow a client presentation in Chicago. My ticket said business class, printed in bold. At the gate, a man in a crisp blazer scanned it, frowned, and told me, "Sweetheart, this is the wrong line." I explained. He smirked. Must have been a mistake. Coach is back there. He didn't check the seat map. He didn't scan. He just sent me to the rear of the plane, right past the empty seat I'd been assigned. I was too young, too unsure to challenge him. That day I learned how quickly people decide who belongs and who doesn't, without asking a single question. The memory didn't hurt anymore, but it hadn't dulled either. Today, the faces were different, the stakes infinitely higher, and my voice, when I chose to use it, infinitely stronger. Becky had moved 2 rows down, speaking into her radio with the subtlety of a megaphone. "Requesting supervisor to business class. Passenger in 2A. Possible fraudulent documentation." The words hung in the air like they were designed to be overheard, and they were. A few passengers exchanged looks. One man gave me a small, uncertain shrug, as if to say, "Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's everything." The supervisor arrived. Mid-40s, ironed uniform. The professional smile of someone who could make an insult sound like an invitation. "Good afternoon," he said to the cabin first, not me. "Thanks for your patience. We'll sort this out quickly." Only then did he turn his attention to me, letting his eyes make a slow tour from my head to my shoes before landing on my face. His gaze lingered just long enough to register difference. "I understand you're traveling on 2A today," he said. "That's correct," I replied. "And you purchased this ticket yourself?" I didn't answer that. "Is there a reason you're asking?" His smile tightened. "Routine questions. May I see your boarding pass again?" I handed it over. He glanced at it, then at me, as if holding both up to some invisible template. Becky hovered at his shoulder like a shadow that could speak. "She claims she bought it on our website," Becky said, framing the claim like a rumor. "But the ticket, it's unusual." The supervisor nodded slowly, letting the word unusual ripen for the audience. "Ma'am, may I also see a government-issued ID?" I slid my driver's license into his hand. "Maya Ellis," he read aloud, almost tasting the syllables. "Traveling to Atlanta for work," I said, offering nothing else. "Uh-huh." His tone wrapped the syllables in tissue paper, like fragile evidence. Behind him, Marlon, the junior agent from earlier, shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He glanced at the tablet in Becky's hand, then at his own scanner. I caught the micro-expression, recognition, then hesitation. He had seen something he wasn't supposed to ignore, but his position told him not to speak. My phone buzzed in the seat pocket. I ignored it. A few seconds later, it buzzed again, and again. A steady rhythm, too persistent to be spam. I knew exactly who it was, but no one else did. That was important. Let them wonder if it was a spouse, a boss, a bill collector. The not knowing was part of the tension. The supervisor leaned back slightly, angling his body toward Becky. Their voices dipped, but not enough to disappear. "Scan again." "She won't mind stepping out while I'm not stepping out of my seat for a scan you can do right here," I said, cutting in without raising my voice. The supervisor turned his full smile on me this time, all porcelain. "We just want to ensure everything's in order." "Then ensure it," I said, motioning toward the scanner. Phones tilted higher. The woman in 2B, a soft scarf looped around her neck, had her camera already aimed. This time she tapped the red circle on her screen. The number live bloomed in the corner. Viewers, 3. It would grow. They always do. Becky shot her a look. "Ma'am, please don't record crew members. It's a public incident in a public cabin," the woman said, steady as if she'd rehearsed it. "If you're right, you've got nothing to worry about." My phone buzzed again. 5 calls now. I glanced at the screen without picking it up. The scarfed woman's camera caught the name lighting up my display. She frowned, maybe recognizing it, maybe not. But her viewers might. They were already typing comments, the screen filling with text too fast to read from where I sat. Marlon took a small step forward, his scanner ready. The supervisor held up a hand, keeping him in check. "Security's on the way," he said to Becky. "Let's just have them verify." The scarfed woman whispered into her mic. "They're calling security. Still no proof anything's wrong." Viewers, 47. I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the pulse in my wrists. Still calm, still waiting. Let them write their own story about who I was and why I was here. Every assumption they made now would sharpen the reversal later. The supervisor's eyes dropped to my phone, still lit with missed calls. "Someone's trying hard to reach you." "Apparently," I said. He waited for me to elaborate. I didn't. Becky crossed her arms, lips pressed thin. "Maybe her friends are telling her to play along." "Or maybe," I said, meeting her gaze, "I'm deciding how much of this to let unfold." The scarfed woman's feed jumped to 102 viewers. Comments scrolled. "She's calm. Something's off. Why won't they scan?" The low whine of the forward door seal broke through the moment. Footsteps. 2 uniformed security officers entered the cabin, scanning the scene. Every phone in sight shifted toward them. The audience had just expanded beyond this cabin, beyond this gate. That was fine. I wasn't ready to close the curtain yet. The 2 security officers stepped fully into the aisle, the cabin lights glinting off their badge clips. One was tall, lean, his face set in a neutral mask. The other, broader in the shoulders, wore an expression that suggested he'd been briefed but not convinced. Becky wasted no time. She raised her arm again, index finger a spear aimed straight at me. "That's her, passenger in 2A with a fraudulent ticket." The words were crisp, rehearsed, like she'd said them before to other people in other seats. The taller officer, badge reading Miller, approached first. "Ma'am, can we see your boarding pass and ID?" he asked. I handed them over without hesitation. He glanced down, eyes moving between the printed name, Maya Ellis, and the seat assignment. Before he could speak, Becky leaned closer to him. "We've had multiple attempts lately. Same pattern. They print these tickets to look real." Her tone wrapped the suggestion in certainty, gifting it to him like a fact. Miller didn't respond right away. The broader officer, Williams, was scanning the cabin instead, noting the passengers with phones raised, the lenses capturing every angle. He looked back at Miller, but Miller had already returned my boarding pass to Becky, not to me. I extended my hand. "I'd like that back." "In a moment," Becky said, not meeting my eyes. She placed the pass on top of her tablet as though it needed to be detained, too. My ID stayed in Miller's hand. He studied it longer than necessary, then lowered it. "This address is in New York?" "Yes," I said. "And you're traveling to Atlanta for work?" he asked. "I am." Becky stepped in before I could elaborate. "We've asked her to step out so we can verify the ticket properly. Livestream viewer count, 972. The scarfed woman in 2B shifted her phone to catch all 3 of us in frame. Becky standing stiff, the officers flanking, me seated and still. The chat on her screen was a blur of comments. "She's calm as stone," as, "Why won't they scan in place?" "Becky looks nervous." I sat back, palms open on my knees. "You can scan it here. There's no reason for me to leave my seat." Becky's mouth twitched. "You don't understand." That's when a voice cut through from behind the officers. "No, maybe you don't understand." The man in 1C had stood up, his height giving him a clear view over both officers. He was older, hair silvered at the temples, the kind of presence that carried its own weight. "I saw her ticket when she boarded. It looked fine. I've been flying this airline for 30 years. I know what a real boarding pass looks like." Becky turned toward him with the same measured patience she'd used on me. "Sir, with respect, this isn't your concern." "It's everyone's concern when a paying customer is treated like a criminal without evidence," he said, his voice firm but calm. Miller shifted uncomfortably. Williams's gaze lingered on the man for a beat before returning to me. "Sir," Becky said again, "you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he interrupted. "And so do the 1,000 people watching this right now." He nodded toward the scarfed woman's phone. "Is that the kind of press you want?" Viewers, 1,024. The comment feed surged. "Yes, someone speaking up. Protect her. This is insane." Becky's cheeks flushed, but she straightened her spine. "Ma'am," she said to me, the edge in her tone sharpening, "you need to gather your belongings and come with us. We can't delay the flight further." "Delay caused by what?" I asked. "The need to verify your documents, which you could have done 20 minutes ago," the man in 1C muttered, not quite under his breath. Becky ignored him. She gestured to my bag at my feet. The movement was brisk, an order disguised as assistance. My phone buzzed again, 6th time. I let it ring out. The scarfed woman's camera caught the screen lighting up, name half hidden by glare. The comments reacted instantly. "Who's calling her? Bet it's important." I looked from Miller to Williams. "Do either of you have any reason to believe my ticket is invalid?" Miller hesitated. Williams spoke first. We're just here to assist the crew, ma'am. Assist in what? I pressed. Williams's eyes flicked to Becky, then back to me. Let's just step out and… No, I said, still calm but firm. You're asking me to leave my seat without cause. That was the moment the low murmur began. A ripple through the cabin, small clusters of passengers leaning toward each other, whispering. The sound grew, layered, until it became a soft current running under every other noise. Some eyes were on me, sympathetic. Others were calculating the odds of making their connections. The tension had shifted from curiosity to collective impatience, the kind that can turn a crowd in either direction. The scarfed woman narrated softly into her mic. She's refusing to move. Security hasn't given a reason. Crew still hasn't scanned the ticket in place. Viewers, 1078. Miller handed my ID back to me finally. Ma'am, if you just step… Williams touched his arm, a quiet signal. Miller paused, but Becky filled the silence. Gather your things, she said. Her finger dropped toward my carry-on, tapping it like punctuation. I didn't move. The man in 1C spoke again. This is harassment. Becky's gaze snapped to him. Sir, please remain seated. Williams cleared his throat. Ma'am, we really do need to… The murmur in the cabin rose another notch, voices overlapping. A woman further back called out, Why won't you just scan it here? Someone else added, Yeah, what's the problem? Becky's smile was brittle. For security reasons. Security is a process, not a reason, I said quietly. But the microphone of the live stream caught it. Comments exploded. Bars. Exactly. She's killing them with calm. Miller straightened. Let's take this conversation off the plane. And there it was. The line they'd been walking toward from the start. An order wrapped in procedure. The live audience, both in the cabin and online, knew it too. The scarfed woman whispered, Here we go. Williams gestured toward the aisle. Please, ma'am. The murmur became a low chorus of reactions, sighs, muttered protests, someone clucking their tongue. I rose slowly, not because they told me to, but because I chose the moment. My movements were deliberate, each one captured on at least a dozen recording devices. I reached for my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and stepped into the aisle. As I moved toward the door, I could feel the weight of every eye. Some looked away when I met their gaze. Others held it, guilty or defiant. The man in 1C sat back down, jaw tight. The scarfed woman adjusted her phone, keeping me in frame until I passed out of her line of sight. Behind me, the murmurs kept moving, chasing me down the aisle in waves. Each one carried a question I could almost hear. What if she's telling the truth? What happens next? I didn't answer any of them, not yet. The forward door loomed closer with each step, the thin metal border of the jet bridge framing it like an exit sign. The light shifted here, brighter, cooler, washing away the warm tones of the business cabin. It exposed details without mercy, the tight lines bracketing Becky's mouth, the faint sheen of sweat along her hairline, the rigid set of her shoulders. She positioned herself half a pace ahead, like she was escorting me out, though no one had said the word escort. Marlon lingered a few feet away, still holding the handheld scanner at his side, his thumb flexing against the trigger button. I stopped just shy of the threshold. The ambient hum of the cabin behind us was replaced by the faint whoosh of air circulation from the jet bridge. The scarfed woman's live stream still caught fragments of the scene, though now partially blocked by seatbacks. I faced Becky squarely. Has anyone scanned the ticket? Her eyes flicked to the scanner in Marlon's hand, then back to mine. Ma'am, we'll handle verification outside the aircraft. That's not what I asked. She smoothed her tone until it was almost pleasant. Let's just keep the process moving. I let the pause stretch, long enough for the quiet to start pulling at the edges of her composure. So, no one has scanned the ticket in the seat I paid for? Her lips parted. But before the words could come, Marlon shifted. His scanner came up in a small, involuntary motion, like muscle memory had kicked in. The device chirped once, the light passing over my boarding pass in Becky's hand. A screen flashed in that small secret language of airline systems. Green background, black text. I caught the words before he angled it away. Ellis Capital, Executive Travel. It was only there for a heartbeat, but it was enough. His eyes darted to mine, and in that split second the color drained from his face. He knew exactly what those words meant, even if no one else in earshot did. And he knew Becky hadn't intended for them to surface. Becky's voice cut the moment apart. "That's enough, Marlon." She angled the scanner toward herself as if she might tuck it away. I slid my phone from my jacket pocket, the cool glass smooth against my palm. My thumb found the contact without looking. 1 ring, 2, then the soft click of a secure line opening. "Initiate review event." That was all I said. My voice was calm, clipped, entirely without decoration. I ended the call and returned the phone to my pocket before anyone could ask a question. Becky frowned, the crease between her brows deepening. "What does that mean?" "It's not your concern," I said. And it wasn't. Not yet. Behind us, Williams, the broader of the 2 security officers, shifted his stance. His radio crackled, a garbled voice breaking through. "Hold on! Possible! Code review flagged!" The words weren't entirely clear, but his reaction was. His posture straightened, head tilting slightly as if to make sure he'd heard correctly. "What's going on?" Miller, the taller officer, asked from behind. Williams didn't answer immediately. His gaze slid toward me, then to Becky, and back to the door. The muscles in his jaw worked as if weighing the cost of speaking. Marlon was looking anywhere but at Becky now. His free hand fidgeted with the edge of his lanyard, the metal clip clicking softly. He'd seen the notation on my profile and understood what review event might trigger. If Becky didn't, she'd learn soon enough. The scarfed woman's live stream view count, now partially out of sight, ticked upward regardless. Word was spreading in comments, maybe from passengers who had moved down the aisle or from snippets picked up in the background. The chat feed lit up. "What's Ellis Capital? She just made a call." "Security looks nervous." I met Williams's eyes briefly. "Is there a problem?" He cleared his throat. "We'll need to check something." The hesitation wasn't lost on me, or on Becky, whose head snapped toward him. "Check what?" "We have a non-compliant passenger." "Who's been calm and cooperative," Williams said, cutting her off, his voice measured but firm. "Let's slow down for a second." That earned a murmur from the passengers still in view down the aisle. A pause had entered the rhythm, the kind that makes people lean forward, sensing the moment before a turn. Becky adjusted her grip on my boarding pass. "We can't delay departure for this." Her words were drowned out by another burst of static from Williams's radio. This time it was clearer. "Confirmation. Flagged under priority review. Notify ground command." Williams's brows lifted a fraction. He tapped the transmit button, voice low. "Copy. Standing by." Becky tried to resume control. "Ma'am, step onto the jet bridge." Instead, I stepped half a pace closer to Marlon. "Did the scan show the correct name and seat?" His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Yes, ma'am." It was quiet, but it carried in the stillness. Becky's shoulders tensed. "Marlon, that's enough," Williams said, this time to her. The air between us was taut now, stretched thin by competing currents. Becky's determination to finish what she'd started, Williams' growing caution, and my own stillness, waiting for the inevitable next signal. From somewhere further down the jet bridge, a shadow moved, likely another airport official responding to the code Williams had received. The sense of the stage expanding was palpable. This was no longer just a passenger dispute. I kept my voice even. "So to be clear, the ticket is valid, the name matches, and yet I'm being removed from my seat without cause?" No one answered immediately, which was an answer in itself. Williams's radio crackled one last time, the voice now sharp and distinct. "Command to Gate 23. Do not proceed until we've cleared the review flag. Stand by for instructions." His jaw tightened. "Understood." That was the first domino. The rest would fall soon enough. The buzz in my pocket was a different tone this time. 3 short pulses, pause. 3 short pulses again. My secure line. I pulled the phone out, the black screen coming alive with a single name. Harrison. Legal. I angled away from the curious stares still aimed at me from the cabin and pressed the phone to my ear. Harrison's voice came through low, deliberate. Maya, I just got your message. You're on Aurora Air, Gate 23? Yes, I murmured. He didn't waste a breath. We hold 38% of their revolving credit facility through the syndicated agreement. Under Section 14.3, Material Adverse Events, we can freeze all future drawdowns if a material discrimination incident is verified. Do you want me to initiate? My eyes flicked toward Becky, who was standing by the jet bridge door, arms crossed like a bouncer, still in full command pose. She had no idea the ground shifting beneath her wasn't from the plane's hydraulics. Hold for now, I said, but be ready. Standing by. Harrison's tone carried the weight of someone who knew exactly how many commas were in a billion. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Behind me, Williams was still in quiet conversation with his radio. Marlin hovered near the scanner, glancing between us like he'd wandered into a storm without an umbrella. Becky's voice sliced through the pause. Ma'am, step onto the jet bridge so we can get this cleared up. Cleared up? I repeated. She nodded toward the scanner in Marlin's hand. We've had glitches before. Until we can verify in the system, you can't occupy that seat. It was already verified, Marlin said under his breath. Becky shot him a look sharp enough to cut. System glitch, she repeated, louder, so the passengers still watching from their seats could hear. The phrase was designed to sound neutral, technical, something the average person wouldn't question. But I knew better. And so did a few people listening closely enough. The scarfed woman's live stream chat was filling with messages. They're lying. The kid said VIP flag. What's Ellis Capital? Williams's radio crackled again. Flag confirmed. Pending upper management clearance. He pressed the transmit button, responding with a clipped copy. Becky stepped closer to him. We don't need to involve anyone else. Just have her wait in the terminal until... Until what? Until the flight left without me? Until there was no witness for the way this was unfolding? I didn't move. So, let me summarize. The ticket matches my name. It's scanned green. There's a VIP notation. And yet, you're still calling it a glitch? Ma'am, Becky said, her patience now visibly thinning. We can't rely on a single device scan. Then try another, I said, nodding toward the podium at the front of the jet bridge. She ignored the suggestion. Please, step out. The scarfed woman's voice carried from her seat. Why don't you just scan it again right here? Viewers on her live stream. 1,482. The cabin's air felt charged now, every molecule holding its breath. Marlin finally stepped forward, raising the scanner again. A quick chirp, another green flash. He read the screen before Becky could block it. Valid. First class 2A. Purchased 3 weeks ago. Corporate account, Ellis Capital, Executive Travel. A few passengers murmured at the corporate name, though most probably didn't recognize it. Becky's jaw tightened. System glitch, she said for the 3rd time, her voice a little too fast. It was the wrong phrase to use a 3rd time. Repetition without variation turns doubt into certainty. In the listener's mind, not yours. Williams glanced at me. Ma'am, would you mind telling us? Before he could finish, a shadow fell across the jet bridge. The doorway to the cockpit opened, and a man in a Navy uniform stepped through, cap under his arm. His stripes marked him as the captain. Hale, according to the brass nameplate above his breast pocket. His eyes swept the scene in a single practice scan. The officers. Becky's stance. My stillness. Marlin's uneasy posture. What's the holdup? Captain Hale's voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Possible fraudulent ticket, Becky said before anyone else could answer. Marlin opened his mouth, but Williams lifted a hand, silencing him. The captain's gaze shifted to me. Is this your seat, ma'am? It is. Do you have your boarding pass? I nodded toward Becky. She has it. Hale held out his hand. After a beat, Becky passed it over. He studied it, then glanced at me. And your ID? I handed it over. He compared the two, his brow furrowing, not in suspicion, but in calculation. Purchased on a corporate account, he said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. Yes, I confirmed. He turned to Becky. Was the ticket scanned? She hesitated. Yes, but... No but, Hale said sharply. Either it's valid or it's not. Marlin took the opening. It's valid, sir. VIP flagged. The captain's gaze locked on Becky for a long moment before he returned the boarding pass and ID to me. Ma'am, would you like to be seated so we can prepare for departure? Becky's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her authority was unraveling in front of the people she'd been performing for. I didn't move yet. Before I sit down, Captain, I think you should hear exactly what's been happening for the last 30 minutes. His eyes narrowed slightly, the kind of look that meant he already suspected he wasn't going to like what he heard. I'm listening. The captain's presence was like a sudden change in cabin pressure. Subtle, but everyone felt it. The air seemed sharper, every sound more distinct. He waited for me to speak, but I didn't give him words right away. Instead, I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer and drew out a card case, the leather worn smooth from years of habit. I slid one card free and held it out between two fingers. The captain accepted it without hesitation, his eyes dropping to the heavy stock and embossed lettering. He read the name slowly, each syllable landing in the hush that had fallen over the jet bridge. Dr. Maya Ellis, Chief Executive Officer, Ellis Capital Partners. The murmur from the cabin was almost imperceptible, like air moving through vents. Even Becky's posture faltered for a fraction of a second before she caught herself. The captain lifted his gaze from the card to meet my eyes. Dr. Ellis, he said, voice more measured now. You said you're here for work? I gave the smallest nod. I am. In fact, I'm here for business with your airline. It wasn't a lie. It was also nowhere near the whole truth. The phrasing was deliberate, a breadcrumb for anyone in this crew with enough context to connect the dots. And judging by the faint flicker in the captain's eyes, he had just enough to suspect what that might mean. Becky stepped in, her voice forced light. Well, regardless of titles, we still need to follow protocol. If you could just provide additional proof. The supervisor, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet until now, seized the opportunity. Yes, perhaps some confirmation of your travel purpose? A letter of authorization, maybe? His tone carried the eagerness of someone tossing a lifeline, not to me, but to Becky. I didn't look at either of them. Instead, I addressed the captain. Tell me, Captain Hale, how much do you know about the terms of Aurora Air's strategic investment talks? His jaw tightened just enough for me to notice, enough to know they're above my pay grade. That's fair, I said, but not above mine. Another subtle shift ran through the space, an almost imperceptible leaning in from the surrounding bodies. The scarfed woman's livestream count surged again, her viewers catching the undertone even if they didn't yet have the details. The chat was exploding. What is happening? She knows something. Business with your airline. What does that mean? Becky tried again, this time with a trace of irritation she couldn't hide. Doctor or not, you've been uncooperative since boarding. If you would just... I turned my head slightly, meeting her eyes. I've been patient. There's a difference. Her mouth closed on whatever she'd been about to say. The supervisor cleared his throat, eager to steer the moment back. Ma'am, if we can't resolve this, I'm afraid we'll have to deplane you until the matter is settled. And if I told you that doing so could cost Aurora Air far more than the value of every ticket on this plane combined? That stopped him. His brows pulled together, not in disbelief, but in calculation. Somewhere in his mind, numbers were starting to collide with possibilities. The captain glanced toward the cockpit, perhaps weighing his own operational deadlines against the risk now hanging in the air. Before he could make a call either way, my phone buzzed again in my pocket. persistent, insistent. The vibration had a weight to it, a pattern I recognized instantly. Not Harrison this time, but another secure contact. I pulled the phone free. The name glowing on the screen was short and sharp: Patrick Lane. Even without knowing who he was, anyone could read the shift in the captain's face when he caught the name. He knew it. The scarfed woman's camera zoomed slightly. Her viewers were already Googling. Patrick Lane wasn't just anyone. He was the CEO of Aurora Air. I let the phone buzz one more time before I answered, pressing the green icon and lifting it to my ear. "Dr. Ellis?" Lane's voice came through taut, the edges fraying with urgency. "Thank God. We've been trying to reach you all morning. Where are you?" "In your business class cabin," I said, tone even. "On the flight you scheduled for me." There was a pause, a heartbeat where the weight of my words landed. Is there a problem?" I didn't answer his question. "We're currently in an interesting situation here at Gate 23. Are you on board already?" he asked quickly. "Yes, though certain members of your crew seem determined to change that." I glanced sideways at Becky as I said it, watching the color drain just a fraction from her cheeks. I don't understand," Lane stammered. "I think you do," I said, my voice still calm, still professional. "And I think you'll understand even better when I explain the last half hour in detail. But perhaps now isn't the time for apologies. Dr. Ellis, if something has happened, something has happened," I said, cutting in gently but firmly. "But before we discuss it, I need to know, are you in a position to take immediate action if necessary?" Another pause. "Yes, whatever you need." I looked to the captain. "Good. Then I'll let you know when the time comes." And with that, I ended the call. No apologies yet, not until the lesson was fully taught. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that made people shift in their seats without knowing why. Becky was no longer speaking. The supervisor was watching me like someone who'd realized they'd walked into the wrong negotiation. The captain was studying me as if trying to place a chess piece he hadn't noticed was on the board until now. In the cabin behind us, I could hear the low murmur of passengers still following every movement. The scarfed woman's live stream feed counter ticked into the thousands. The comments flew past faster than they could be read. "That's the CEO on the line. She knows the big boss. This is going to blow up." I tucked my phone back into my pocket, the business card still in the captain's hand, catching the overhead light. I didn't need to say more just yet. The first reveal had been made. The rest would follow in due time. I didn't bother moving from my spot in the jet bridge. Instead, I drew my phone out again, tapped the screen, and redialed Patrick Lane. When he picked up on the first ring, I pressed the speaker icon and held the phone at chest level, the microphone aimed toward me. "Dr. Ellis?" His voice was tight, like a man already bracing for impact. "This line is now on speaker," I said. "Everything I'm about to tell you will be heard by your captain, your ground staff, and about half the passengers in your business class cabin. I suggest you listen without interruption." Behind me, the hush was electric. Even the shuffle of feet and the occasional cough had stopped. "In the past 35 minutes, I began, I have been accused of possessing a fraudulent ticket. I have been ordered out of my seat. I have been told I don't belong here. I have been ignored after presenting valid identification and a confirmed boarding pass. And all of this," I let my gaze drift to Becky, "has been done loudly, publicly, and without a shred of actual evidence other than assumptions based on who I appear to be." The scarfed woman's live stream counter jumped from 3,200 to 4,100. Someone near the back of the cabin muttered, "Oh my God," under their breath. Lane's voice cracked through the silence. "This is unacceptable. Dr. Ellis, please, You will listen," I said, my tone sharpening just enough to clip his words. "Because now we arrive at the real problem. I am not just a passenger, Mr. Lane. I am the CEO of Ellis Capital Partners, and we control 38% of Aurora Air's revolving credit facility, which means, under the terms of our agreement, I can order an immediate freeze on all drawdowns if a material discrimination incident is documented. I paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. It landed differently with each person within earshot. Shock for some, dawning horror for others. Becky's face for the first time betrayed uncertainty. The supervisor's throat bobbed with a dry swallow. "So here are your options," I continued. Option 1. You take immediate, visible corrective action right here and now, while your passengers and the public are watching. Option 2. I initiate the freeze, which will trigger defaults in your upcoming credit cycle and send a very clear message to your shareholders about the operational culture you've chosen to tolerate. The scarfed woman's chat exploded. "She's not bluffing. This is corporate-level checkmate. Somebody get popcorn." Lane didn't answer right away. I could hear his breathing, the sound of papers being shuffled, perhaps an executive aide whispering into his other ear. Then, "Dr. Ellis, I understand the gravity of this situation. Please, allow me a moment to act." "You have 60 seconds, I said. The captain's eyes flicked toward the clock on the bulkhead. Becky shifted her weight, her authority eroding by the second. 30 seconds later, Lane's voice returned, harder now, carrying the steel of someone making an irreversible choice. "Effective immediately, Becky Hart. You are suspended from duty pending a full investigation into this incident. You will surrender your ID and leave the aircraft. Supervisor Mills, you will escort her off." The words seemed to knock the air out of Becky. "What? You can't—" "I just did," Lane snapped. "Mills, now." The supervisor, Mills, stepped forward, his earlier bravado gone. He took Becky gently but firmly by the elbow. "Come on, Becky." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the passengers, to the scarfed woman's camera, to me. There was no saving this scene. She handed over her lanyard and ID card with a stiffness that bordered on brittle, then turned and walked down the jet bridge, her posture shrinking with each step. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply watched, committing the image to memory. Consequences weren't about revenge. They were about clarity. Lane's voice came back over the speaker. "Dr. Ellis, I will be at our destination airport to meet you personally. I intend to ensure your journey proceeds without further incident." I gave a small nod, though he couldn't see it. "We'll discuss what happens next when I arrive. For now, you have a plane to launch and a public narrative to manage." "Yes, ma'am." The line clicked dead. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and turned toward the cabin. The scarfed woman's live stream counter was climbing past 6,000. Passengers leaned into the aisle to watch me step back toward seat 2A, and then it began. A ripple from the digital world into the physical. Someone's phone buzzed in the row behind me. A man in 3C glanced down and muttered, "It's already on Twitter." The scarfed woman's voice cut in, "Guys, it's trending. Hashtag Aurora discrimination." I sat, buckled in, and opened my laptop. Above the hum of the ventilation system, I could hear passengers whispering, phones pinging with news alerts, the sudden flurry of a story escaping the confines of a single aircraft. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about the entire altitude of Aurora Air's reputation, and I'd just punched a hole clean through the fuselage. The jet bridge was clear now, Becky's departure leaving a vacuum in its wake. I sat in 2A, my laptop open but idle. The captain stood in the aisle, one hand braced against the headrest in front of me. His composure was steady, but I could see the pulse ticking in his neck. "Captain Hale," I said evenly, "before we resume this flight, there are a few conditions." He nodded once, a cautious acceptance. "Go on." "First, I want a written incident record, now, before takeoff. It will detail every minute from the initial boarding to Becky Hart's suspension. It will be signed by you, your remaining senior crew, and Supervisor Mills. No euphemisms, no omissions." His gaze flickered to the purser still hovering in the galley. "We can arrange that." "Second," I continued, "every crew member on this flight will attend a mandatory bias and cultural competency training within the next 30 days. That includes cockpit crew. This is not negotiable." The purser stiffened, perhaps unused to being spoken to in the same breath as the flight attendants. I didn't soften my tone. If you want this airline to avoid a repeat of today, start here, with the people in this cabin. Hale nodded again, slower this time. And the third? Not a condition, I said, more of a disclosure. I let the pause draw just long enough to make the surrounding passengers lean in slightly. Ellis Capital is also the largest private stakeholder in the Midfield Expansion Project at Logan International. I chair the Funding Oversight Committee. If Aurora Air expects to gain its proposed gate allotment increase during Phase 2, it will need my signature to clear procurement approval. The words landed like a hidden mine. A ripple went through the cabin, not from the passengers this time, but from the crew. I could see Mills processing it, realizing that this was no one-off incident to be smoothed over with an apology letter. "Dr. Ellis," Hale said, lowering his voice, though everyone could still hear. "I understand." I leaned back slightly. "Good. Then you also understand why this isn't the moment to stall." The scarfed woman's live stream counter, still propped in her lap, climbed past 18,000 viewers. Comments were coming in from usernames tagged with verified checkmarks. News anchors, industry bloggers, even a local Boston politics reporter I recognized from past interviews. They'd all picked up the scent. "Captain," I added, "bring me a printed incident form. We'll complete it now, in the open." Within 5 minutes, Mills returned with a clipboard and 2 copies of the airline's irregularity report template. The paper trembled slightly in his hand as he passed it over. "This is our standard form," he said, "but we can attach an addendum for details." I clicked my pen, the sound sharp in the warm air of the cabin. Passengers craned subtly toward me as I began writing, not scribbling, but methodically, each line capturing the sequence of events in precise, unemotional language. 1403. Passenger boarded with valid boarding pass for seat 2A. 1407. Lead FA. Becky Hart approached passenger, questioned legitimacy of ticket in elevated tone. 1409. Passenger presented boarding pass and identification. Both were dismissed without verification in airline system. 1414. Supervisor called, engaged in visual appraisal unrelated to travel documentation. 1419. Accusations of fraudulent ticket escalated in full hearing of cabin. 1422. Passenger requested ticket scan. Request ignored. 1425. Security called without procedural verification. And on it went. Each timestamp was a pin in the map of their failure. Each factual description a quiet blade. When I finished, I slid the form to Hale. "Read it," I said. "If you disagree with any detail, say so now, while the live stream is rolling." He scanned the page, lips tightening as he moved down the list. "No disagreements." He signed at the bottom, passing it to Mills, who signed without raising his eyes. The purser added her name last. I signed last, looping my signature in a deliberate, steady motion. Then I tapped the edge of the paper. "This is now part of your internal record, and my legal one." The scarfed woman's voice broke in softly but audibly, her phone angled toward the form. "They're signing it, guys. All of them." The counter ticked up again, 23,000, 25,000, 27,000, as the moment captured itself in real time. "Dr. Ellis," Hale said, "will this resolve the matter enough to depart?" "For today," I said. "Yes, but resolution is not forgiveness. The real work starts when you land." He nodded, retreating toward the cockpit. Mills collected the signed copy like a man holding an artifact too hot to touch. I folded my own copy and slipped it into my briefcase. The weight of it wasn't in the paper. It was in the permanence of the acknowledgement. The fact that there would be no erasing this. From somewhere near the galley, the purser's voice drifted forward. "Cabin crew, prepare doors for departure." The live stream counter hit 31,000. Comments scrolled faster than eyes could follow. "This is history. She's playing chess, not checkers. Midfield expansion equals leverage. OMG." As the plane began to push back, I rested my hands on the armrests, feeling the subtle shift as we left the gate. The form was signed. The commitments had been spoken aloud. and Aurora Air had just discovered that their second strike was more than enough to put the rest of the game under my control. The jet bridge door sealed with a dull metallic thud as Becky disappeared from view, flanked by Mills and a uniformed ground agent. From my seat in 2A, I caught the briefest glimpse of her profile, lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line, before the glass porthole swallowed her. The purser's voice crackled over the intercom. "Cabin crew, secure doors for departure." The cabin exhaled collectively, though not in unison. Relief from some, unease from others. A few passengers allowed small, approving nods in my direction. Others kept their gazes fixed forward, as if avoiding eye contact might shield them from whatever had just happened. As I settled into my seat, buckling the belt with deliberate calm, I registered the ambient shift. The hostility that had hung in the air like static was gone, but something else had taken its place. A taut, cautious silence, the kind that follows a sudden storm. I could feel eyes on me from several directions. The older gentleman in 3C gave me a subtle smile, the kind shared between survivors of the same unexpected turbulence. The woman with the silk scarf, the live streamer, adjusted her phone slightly so it caught me in profile, though she'd stopped narrating for now. And yet, not everyone was swayed. 2 rows ahead, the businessman who had earlier kept his nose buried in a newspaper still refused to turn around. Across the aisle, a middle-aged couple whispered, glancing my way with guarded expressions. Their skepticism clung like stubborn residue. Twist felt sharp in my chest, vindication and vigilance, all at once. Winning a battle didn't erase the war. I powered on my laptop, its screen blooming to life with the familiar dashboard of Ellis Capital's secure workspace. My fingers moved without hesitation, opening the draft of the Aurora Air investment proposal. The main document was intact: 1.2B investment, equity exchange, governance clauses. But it needed one more element now, one that wasn't just a penalty for what happened, but a blueprint to prevent it. In the section labeled Governance, I inserted a bold new header: Cultural Remediation Annex. Beneath it, I began typing with the same precision I'd used in the incident report: Mandatory Cultural Competency Training. All Aurora Air employees, regardless of role, to complete a certified bias awareness program within 60 days. Passenger Advocacy Program. Independent, direct reporting unit empowered to intervene in real-time incidents. Quarterly public reporting. Summary of all passenger complaints involving discrimination, published without anonymizing patterns. Credit facility conditionality. Renewal and drawdown access contingent on annual audit compliance. Each keystroke was both a safeguard and a signal. Aurora Air had stumbled into this confrontation assuming it was a passenger service problem. They were about to learn it was a governance problem, and I was the one holding the fix. The aircraft began its slow pushback from the gate, the engine hum rising in pitch. I barely glanced up. The purser came down the aisle with the drink orders for pre-departure service, but her hands were tight on the tray, her smile practiced, brittle. She stopped briefly at my seat. "Dr. Ellis, may I offer you something before takeoff?" Sparkling water, no lemon. My tone was even, professional. This wasn't about personal comfort. It was about re-establishing the proper dynamic. She nodded quickly, retreating toward the galley. From my peripheral vision, I caught the scarfed woman glancing between me and her phone. The live stream counter had ticked beyond 38,000. I suspected much of the audience was simply waiting for the next escalation. They didn't know the most decisive blow had already been set in motion. 15 minutes into taxi, my phone buzzed against the armrest. A secure notification banner flashed across the top of the screen. Ellis Capital Risk Management, Priority Alert. I unlocked the device with a fingerprint scan. The message was concise, clinical. Aurora Air Credit Facility. Status: frozen pending your clearance. Trigger: material discrimination incident documented via verified channels. Note: automatic escalation to credit committee per governance protocol. I read it twice, my pulse steady. The mechanism was automatic, built into the very agreements Aurora Air's finance team had celebrated 18 months ago. They'd thought of it as a safeguard against corporate fraud or insolvency. None of them had considered that material discrimination would be the clause to trip the wire. Sliding the phone face down on the tray table, I let the knowledge settle. The fight wasn't over. It had simply shifted altitudes. From here, the leverage wasn't emotional or public. It was financial, hardwired into Aurora Air's operational oxygen supply. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for takeoff. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin." As the engines roared and the nose pitched skyward, I thought of the balance sheet waiting on Aurora Air's CFO's desk. How quickly those columns would start to constrict without access to their revolving credit line. They'd soon learn that the same woman they'd tried to escort out of 2A was now the one controlling whether their expansion plans survived the quarter. When we leveled off, the cabin lights dimmed slightly. Conversations resumed in cautious fragments. I noticed the skeptical couple across the aisle had gone quiet, their earlier side glances replaced by something closer to wariness. A shift, perhaps small, but telling. I returned to my laptop, the cursor blinking patiently beside the last line of the Cultural Remediation Annex. Under the 4 main provisions, I typed a final clause: executive accountability. Any officer or manager found complicit in discriminatory conduct will face immediate disciplinary action, up to and including termination, with such actions publicly disclosed. I saved the document, encrypting it before closing the lid. The annex wasn't just a punitive measure, it was a seed. And seeds, given the right environment, grow into roots that reshape the entire ground beneath them. The purser returned with my sparkling water, setting it gently on the tray. "Here you are, Dr. Ellis." Her voice had softened, but I detected the careful balance in it, respect edged with self-preservation. "Thank you." She lingered for half a second, then moved on. Outside, the sky was a clean blue slate. Inside, the atmosphere was still charged, but the current now ran in my direction. The flight had resumed, yes, but for Aurora Air, the descent had only just begun. The seatbelt sign had been off for less than 10 minutes when the first ripple reached me. It began as a vibration against the table. My phone, lighting up with notification after notification. The scarfed woman 2 rows back was still live streaming, but now her commentary had shifted from the cabin itself to what was exploding online. "They've clipped it," she whispered to her viewers, excitement bubbling. The exact moment she pointed. That finger, that face. It's everywhere. I didn't need to look to know which frame she meant. Becky's arm rigid, index finger stabbing the air toward me, her jaw set in a mask of certainty. And me, still seated, still calm, meeting her glare head on. The perfect visual shorthand for the entire encounter. My phone buzzed again, this time with a different kind of alert. Trending metrics. #Aurora discrimination had surpassed 400,000 mentions in under an hour. A composite image of Becky's finger and my steady gaze had already been turned into a dozen memes, some savage, some celebratory. Someone had even looped it into a 5-second GIF titled, "When You Pick the Wrong Passenger." A chuckle escaped before I could stop it. Not because of the mockery itself, but because I knew the image would outlast this flight, possibly even this week. Halfway through scrolling, a new notification slid across the screen. Not from social media, but from my encrypted business channel. Incoming request, Blue Jet Airways. Executive liaison, subject, potential strategic partnership. Dr. Ellis, we've been following coverage of your recent flight. Your composure and measured approach under public scrutiny align perfectly with the leadership profile we're seeking for our next growth phase. We'd like to discuss a direct investment partnership at your earliest convenience. Mini twist. Another airline, not Aurora, not even a competitor in the same market segment, was trying to court me before the wheels touched down in Atlanta. And they were framing it as admiration for my civil handling of a very public crisis. I sat back, considering the layers. Blue Jet wasn't as large as Aurora, but they had two advantages: a spotless diversity record and an aggressive expansion plan in secondary markets. An investment there would send a message, not just to Aurora's board, but to the industry at large, that my capital favored cultures built on respect. I tapped a quick reply. Noted. Will consider timing. Currently in flight. Nothing committal, but enough to keep the door open. The purser passed by again, refilling a glass of water at my table. She glanced at my phone, eyes flickering over the unread notification count. "Busy afternoon, Dr. Ellis?" she asked lightly. "You could say that," I replied, not bothering to hide the faint smile. Around me, the mood of the passengers had shifted. Those who'd earlier sat rigid with discomfort now leaned subtly toward curiosity, as if wanting to attach themselves to the winning side of a story still unfolding. A young man in a fitted suit across the aisle caught my eye and mouthed, "Well played." I gave him a polite nod. This blend of emotions, satisfaction from my supporters, curiosity from the neutral, the lingering silence of the doubters, was a familiar cocktail from boardrooms and negotiation tables. It was also the perfect setup. The audience wasn't just engaged. They were hooked, leaning forward for the next move. And the next move was already on my calendar. At 3:02 p.m., my assistant's name flashed across the phone. "Aurora's executive office just confirmed," she said without preamble. "They're requesting an emergency session in Atlanta as soon as you land. Full board attendance." I raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't see it. "Full board? That's unusually fast." "They're rattled," she said. "I think the freeze on their credit facility hit before they could control the internal messaging. Half the board probably learned about it from the media. Perfect. Not ideal for them, but perfect for me. When corporate leadership is caught between public backlash and financial pressure, they become cooperative." "Confirm my attendance," I told her, "and tell them I expect the meeting room secured, with recording capability enabled from my side." Done. The call ended. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the quiet hum of the engines settle around me. In the space of 2 hours, I had shifted from being publicly accused of fraud to being the fulcrum on which Aurora's immediate future now balanced. Somewhere ahead, 36,000 feet below us, Atlanta waited, along with a room of executives who would arrive rehearsed, defensive, and ready to bargain. What they didn't know yet was that my offer to bargain would come wrapped in clauses they'd never imagined agreeing to before this morning. The scarfed woman spoke softly into her phone again. "She's just sitting there, calm as ever. I swear, it's like she's playing the long game and we're all just catching up." She wasn't wrong. The elevator ride to Aurora Air's executive floor was silent except for the muted chime marking each passing level. The glass doors parted into a corridor lined with framed photos of aircraft, smiling crews, and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Snapshots of an image they still thought they owned. At the far end, a double-door conference room stood open. Inside, a long polished table gleamed under recessed lighting, its surface already crowded with tablets, water glasses, and the rigid posture of a dozen board members. Robert Kane, the CEO, rose to greet me, his smile stretched too thin to hide the strain in his eyes. "Dr. Ellis, we appreciate you joining us on such short notice," he said, gesturing to an empty chair at the head of the table. I didn't sit immediately. Instead, I placed my laptop on the table, flipped it open, and activated the voice recorder. For transparency, I'm documenting this discussion. Given this morning's events, I'm sure you understand. A ripple of uneasy glances passed between them, but no one objected. I took my seat, leaned forward, and began without preamble. Let's dispense with pleasantries. You're aware of the material discrimination incident logged this morning. You're also aware that under the terms of our preliminary agreements, Ellis Capital holds conditional leverage over Aurora's credit facility. A few of them shifted in their seats. The CFO's pen stilled in midair. "I'm prepared to proceed with the investment," I continued. but only under revised conditions designed to address the systemic failures this incident exposed. I tapped my screen, projecting a slide titled Cultural Remediation Requirements onto the wall display. Mandatory cultural competency training. All employees, from cabin crew to C-suite, must complete an accredited program within 60 days. Passenger Advocacy Desk. A staffed, independent unit stationed at all major hubs, empowered to intervene in real time. Ethical KPI integration. Quarterly executive bonuses will be tied to measurable diversity and inclusion outcomes, subject to third-party audit. This, I said, is non-negotiable. Without it, the deal dies here. Robert cleared his throat. Dr. Ellis, these are substantial measures. We're open to addressing the situation, but tying KPIs to ethics, I cut him off with a raised hand. You've tied them to fuel efficiency, on-time departures, and cost reductions. If you can link pay to metrics that affect profit, you can link it to metrics that protect your passengers. Before he could respond, I advanced to the next slide. This was the twist they hadn't anticipated. In addition, I said, Ellis Capital's equity position will increase from 25% to 35%, and Aurora Air will establish a dedicated cultural advancement fund. $50 million over 3 years, managed jointly by our organizations to finance training, advocacy, and systemic bias research. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the soft click of someone's pen. A few board members exchanged sharp whispers. The CFO finally spoke, her voice tight. That's a significant shift from the original terms. I met her gaze evenly. So was accusing your incoming strategic partner of fraud in front of a cabin full of passengers and 40,000 livestream viewers. This isn't a penalty, it's risk mitigation. Robert exhaled, the fight leaking out of his posture. What you're asking will change our cost structure. It will change a lot. That's the point, I said. Cosmetic changes won't keep this from happening again. Structural ones will. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the chair of this governance committee, a woman with steel gray hair and the air of someone who'd survived her share of crises, nodded slowly. She's right. This goes deeper than a PR incident. One by one, the other heads began to nod. Not out of agreement, perhaps, but out of recognition that the alternative was far worse. Finally, Robert looked around the table and gave a single, reluctant nod. We'll accept the terms. But I wasn't finished. There's one final item, I said, letting the pause draw them in. The lead flight attendant from this morning, Becky Hart, will be required to attend the first session of cultural competency training. If she completes the program, demonstrates genuine behavioral change, and receives a positive evaluation from an independent review panel, I'll personally endorse her return to the industry. A murmur swept the table. Robert tilted his head. You'd be willing to vouch for her? I believe in accountability, I said, but I also believe in the possibility of change. This isn't about removing people. It's about removing the conditions that make their behavior acceptable. The governance chair's eyes softened, just slightly. That's unexpected. Unexpected doesn't mean uncalculated, I replied. Redemption stories are powerful, and a reformed Becky Hart could become a symbol of Aurora's transformation rather than its failure. I leaned back, letting the weight of the terms settle into the room. Those are my conditions. Accept them now, and we move forward. Decline, and I'll open my schedule for Blue Jet Airways tomorrow. The threat hung in the air without the need for raised voices. They all knew about Blue Jet's approach by now. News traveled fast in aviation boardrooms. Robert's jaw worked silently for a moment before he said, We'll proceed on your terms, Dr. Ellis. Effective immediately. I closed my laptop with a quiet snap, the sound sealing the deal as surely as any signed contract. Then we have an agreement. Somewhere beyond the walls of that conference room, Becky Hart was likely processing the fact that her career wasn't over, at least not yet. And for Aurora Air, the real work was only beginning. 6 months later, the numbers told a story even more dramatic than the headlines. Aurora Air's customer satisfaction scores had climbed from a dismal 2.4 to an unprecedented 4.7 across major travel platforms. Complaint resolution times had been cut by more than half. Discrimination-related grievances, once a quiet but persistent trickle, had dropped to 0 for 3 consecutive months, a statistic so rare in the industry that it caught the attention of regulators and competitors alike. I sat at my office desk, a stack of letters arranged in neat piles beside me. They came in every week now, some typed on company letterhead, others handwritten in uneven scrawl, the ink smudged from travel. One was from a retired veteran who had been upgraded to first class without asking, simply because a gate agent noticed his service pin. Another from a mother traveling with her autistic son, grateful for a crew that provided noise-canceling headphones before she even requested them. Each letter was more than a thank you. They were data points, evidence that the reforms were not just policy. They were culture now. My assistant stepped in, a single envelope in hand. "This one's marked personal," she said. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. I slid it open and began to read. "Dr. Ellis, I wasn't sure if I should write to you. 6 months ago, I was certain my career was over. Today, I'm not the same person you met on Flight 2228. I completed the DEI program you insisted upon. At first, I sat in those sessions convinced they were a punishment, but over time, I realized they were a mirror. I didn't like the reflection I saw. I'm now working with an aviation-focused nonprofit that trains crews on empathy and bias awareness. We've already reached 1,200 staff across 5 airlines. None of this would have happened without that day, without you holding the door open for a different ending. Becky Hart." I set the letter down slowly. There was no absolution in it, no plea for public forgiveness, just an acknowledgement of transformation and an echo of the very reason I'd insisted on the program. Twist number 6. The woman who once pointed her finger at me, publicly stripping me of dignity, was now using her hands to guide others toward better service. It was a full-circle moment, the kind that didn't scream for applause, but hummed with quiet significance. 2 weeks later, I had reason to see it for myself. The nonprofit Becky now worked for had partnered with Aurora to host a cross-industry symposium on equitable passenger treatment. When I arrived at the event, she was on stage, speaking with a calm assurance that was unrecognizable from the clipped aggression of that morning months ago. "Bias isn't always loud," she told the audience. "Sometimes it's in the glance you don't check yourself on, or the assumption you make before you even say hello. I know, because I've been guilty of it, and I've been given the chance to change." We met in the wings afterward. She extended her hand, and this time I took it without hesitation. "Thank you," she said simply. "You did the work," I replied. "I just made sure there was a path." The handshake was brief, but the look in her eyes carried something enduring, humility, and a resolve to make amends. 6 months earlier, that interaction would have been impossible. Now, it felt inevitable. A week later, I was back where the arc of this story had begun, Seat 2A in Aurora's business class. The cabin lights cast that same warm glow, the same soft shadows across the curved panels and brushed metal. The difference was almost imperceptible unless you knew where to look. The crew greeting each passenger by name, offering assistance without the edge of judgment, scanning tickets with both efficiency and respect. A young attendant placed a glass of sparkling water on my tray. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Ellis," she said with a genuine smile. I returned it. "It's good to be here." The engines hummed, a low, steady rhythm beneath the cabin chatter. I glanced out the window at the tarmac, then back toward the aisle where a family with 2 small children was settling in. No one eyed them suspiciously. No one sighed at the extra time it took to arrange their seating. The patience felt natural, embedded, not forced. As the aircraft doors closed, I allowed my gaze to linger on the space just ahead of row 2, where Becky's outstretched arm had once framed the worst of my humiliation. I remembered the sting of that moment, the heat in my chest, the decision to let the story unfold before revealing who I was. Now, that memory was softened, Not erased, but transformed by what had followed. A rewritten contract, a cultural overhaul, lives shifted toward better. The captain's voice came over the intercom, smooth and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. Our flight time today is..." I leaned back, letting the words fade into the background. Outside, the runway lights stretched into the distance like a path laid out for the next chapter. I smiled. Not the restrained curve I'd worn in negotiation rooms, but a genuine one. The system had changed, and in its place, a legacy was taking root quietly, flight by flight.